All right, today we're diving into one of the most loaded words you can use right now: genocide, specifically in the whole debate around Gaza. Now, this is a topic that's legally complicated and, let's be honest, incredibly emotional. Our goal here isn't to pick a side, it's to really unpack the arguments so you can understand what this fierce disagreement is actually all about. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we have to start with the actual legal definition, get everyone on the same page. Then, we'll look at the core arguments clashing with each other. From there, we'll dig into 5 specific reasons, point by point, before taking a step back to see the big picture. And finally, we'll talk about why this one word, why it matters so much. So, first things first. Before we can even touch the arguments, we've got to understand the rulebook. And for this, the rulebook is the 1948 Genocide Convention. It was literally created right after the Holocaust to say, never again. Now, look at how precise this is. It's not just about terrible acts, it's all about the why. You've got 2 phrases here that are absolutely critical: intent to destroy and in whole or in part. That means you have to prove a specific goal was behind the actions. And, this is key for the Gaza debate, the target doesn't have to be an entire population across the globe. It can be a specific part of that group. The convention then lays out these 5 specific acts. Now, killing members of the group, that's the one we all think of, right? But look at the others: causing serious bodily or mental harm. And especially that third one, deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction. That one is central to the current debate because it goes way beyond just counting bodies. Okay, so with that legal stuff in our back pocket, let's get to the main event, the clash of interpretations that we're looking at today. So, on one side, you have groups like the American Jewish Committee, or AJC, who've laid out a very clear case for why they believe the term is flat out wrong here. But then on the other side, you have investigative bodies. We're talking a UN Human Rights Council Commission, groups of genocide scholars who've looked at the very same evidence and have come to the exact opposite conclusion. So let's really get into the weeds now. We're going to break down the 5 main arguments the AJC makes for why this isn't genocide. And for each one, we'll put it side by side with what these independent bodies have found. Okay, reason number 1 from the HAC is all about scale. They argue that the level of destruction required by law, even that in-part clause, just hasn't been reached. And boom, right away you can see the conflict. The AJC says the threshold's not met. Meanwhile, the UN Commission says not only is it met, but they've found that 4 of the 5 genocidal acts are being committed. And they specify that the intent is to destroy Palestinians in Gaza in part. For them, that line has definitely been crossed. All right, next up is that huge word we talked about earlier, intent. The AJC's position is pretty straightforward. There's no smoking gun, no clear, undeniable proof of an intent to destroy Palestinians as a group. But here's where it gets really interesting. In international law, you'll almost never find a memo that says, let's commit genocide. It just doesn't happen. So courts and investigators can infer intent from a pattern of actions and statements. And that's exactly what the UN Commission says it did. They concluded that genocidal intent is, and I'm quoting here, the only reasonable inference you can make from everything they've seen and heard. Argument number 3 reframes the whole thing. The AJC says, look, what's happening are the actions of a military fighting a war in self-defense. And that, legally, is a totally different category than genocide. And here's the crucial legal point. While self-defense might be the stated reason for the military operation, international law is crystal clear on this. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card. You can't just claim self-defense and be immune from the Genocide Convention. One doesn't just cancel out the other. Reason 4 makes a really important distinction between the tragedy of war and the specific crime of genocide. The AJC argues that even a massive number of civilian casualties doesn't automatically mean the legal standard for genocide has been met. And you know what? Legally, they're right. Not every war crime is genocide. But here's the nuance. The UN Commission's findings aren't just about the death toll. They point back to those other acts in the convention, things like the siege, the destruction of hospitals and homes, and they classify those as inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction. Okay, the final argument is a little different. It's less about legal specifics and more about protecting the power of the word itself. The AJC is worried that if we use the word genocide incorrectly, we risk making it mean less, and in doing so, trivializing historical horrors like the Holocaust. And this creates a really powerful tension, doesn't it? On one hand, you have this very real concern about watering down the term, but the UN Commission's perspective shows you the other side of that coin. What's the risk of not using the word when the evidence is there? They argue it weakens the entire system designed to prevent it, and crucially, it denies victims the right to have their experience properly named.
So, after going through all 5 of those points, let's zoom out. What's the big picture here? When you step back and look at the whole argument, how complete is it?
The analysis we're using for this explainer puts it like this. The AJC's argument makes perfect sense if you only look at the points they raise. But the criticism is that it fails what's called the completeness test because it doesn't really engage with the whole mountain of evidence that others have brought forward. So, what exactly is missing according to this analysis? Well, it's some pretty major stuff. The direct UN Commission finding we've been talking about, a resolution from genocide scholars, a huge interim order from the World Court itself. The critique isn't that the AJC is ignoring minor details, it's that they're downplaying official findings from major international bodies that give a lot of weight to the other side of the argument. And that brings us to our final, and honestly, our most important question. After all this back and forth, why does this one word matter so much anyway? Because it's never just a word, is it? The outcome of this debate has massive real-world consequences for international law, for whether states can be held accountable, and maybe most of all, it's about the very basic, fundamental right of victims to have their suffering seen, to have it named, and to have it acknowledged by the rest of the world. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. In a situation like this, where the evidence seems to be pulling in one direction and the rhetoric in another, whose job is it? Whose responsibility is it to see the full, complicated, and often really uncomfortable picture?